So, good morning and a very warm welcome to the co-authors of A Practitioner's Guide to Enterprise Agility. As a former PM Powerian and a friend of PM Power Consulting, I am honored and I look forward to this conversation with the three authors. So, very warm welcome to you all.
Thank you, Chitra.
Morning, Chitra. Thank you. Nice catching up with you after a long time.
Likewise, JV.
Morning, Chitra. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paramu. And I think I'm going to fire the first salvo, if it was, to you, Paramu. This, like all of us are nicely addicted to OTT simply because there are sequels, and prequels to the sequel and so on. So how was this for you writing? How tough was it or how different was it from the previous two books that you wrote or you helped anchor, if I may?
Okay, the first book was slightly different. It's more on project management, right? And program management. So that's slightly different from these two books. Whereas this book is really, I wouldn't call it a sequel really. No, a sequel is a continuation of a story, right? For example, Godfather 1 and Godfather 2. And sometimes these sequels are better than the original, right? Or Star Wars 1 and Star Wars 2, right? But this is not really a sequel in that sense. It's more of an explanatory or a application-oriented or creating an application out of the previous book, right? So it's not really a sequel, right? So, but if you look at my other book, First Aryan, I started writing the Second Aryan. It's not reached anywhere yet, right? But that sequel is 2,000 years apart. First happens in 6,000 BC, second in 4,000 BC, right? But even then, it's still a sequel because it's some of the characters are 60th generation of the previous book, right? But here it's the same characters, and what they say. I was just looking at some website. What they say is that a sequel, you should always introduce a new character. In every sequel, there should be a new bang-on character, right? But we didn't have a new character in this sequel. They are the same characters, right? But doing different things and looking at the outcomes and talking about their failures and their successes. Right? So actually, yeah, so writing a sequel is actually very interesting because for one thing, you get to expand on what you did before, right? Yeah, so this was the experience, I think, in writing this sequel. Yeah.
Thanks, Paramu. When I briefly glanced through the book, I will confess that I haven't fully read it. It gave me a sense of familiarity, which is very similar to what I experienced when I watched sequels of favorite, TV shows. Is the sense of familiarity with the characters I feel is important, especially to a book like this. Right. And it forms a nice companion to the previous book, which is Five Tantras of Agility. So I really hope that people pick both of them together and then look at them sort of parallelly when they're embarking on their agility journey.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So JV, then why did this book come to be? When the Five Tantras were already discussed as part of enterprise agility?
Question. Basically, Five Tantras operated at a philosophy values level. If you really look at it for an enterprise, I mean, if you really look at the Agile Manifesto in some way, it's applicable to more like teams and programs, especially software delivery programs. That's the kind of stuff that Agile Manifesto came to be, associated with. We felt that we needed to take it slightly higher from an organizational perspective. And that's why we came up with this thing called our PM Power Manifesto, right? And this manifesto is somewhat similar to the Agile Manifesto in the sense that, we kind of had a left side and the right side and said that the left side items are much more important than the right side item. That's the kind of stuff that we came up with. And those we called as 5 tantras or 5 values. Basically, the 5 values are customer outcome focus, self-organization, transformational leadership, experimentation and learning, and lean thinking. We said these are 5 really important values from an organization perspective. And Agile Manifesto, while it addressed some things for software delivery teams, we needed to take this up to an enterprise level. And that's where these 5 values came in. So what the first book did was to explain these values, what the values meant. For example, how you can detect deviation from these values. And broadly, not talked about how you can address those deviations. That's how we actually looked at the first book. But then we realized that there were no details for people who actually wanted to take them forward from an implementation perspective. And this is where the sequel, or not the sequel, the way that Paramu described it. The second book, this book came in. We said that we need to get into implementation. And this is where there was a lot of debate, what kind of approach we needed to take. Should it be the same organization? All that kind of stuff. A lot of debate. Especially being co-authors, we had our own views and points of opinion and things like that. We must have debated endlessly. The first 6 months looked like we almost gave up. We said, no, we may not come up with this book. At some point in time, we even thought that the book may not see the light of the day. But anyway, I think good that we were able to come to a conclusion after about 2 or 3 iterations. So we actually said we'll take the stakeholders as the primary focus, look at their outcomes, and look at indicators for those outcomes, and then figure out what practices would be necessary for achieving those outcomes and tools and techniques. And this we kind of mapped onto the values, the 5 tantras. So basically these practices spawn those tantras. That's the way that we have actually described this. So in that sense, a combination of book 1 and book 2. I mean, when I say the first one, which is the enterprise agility, 5 tantras, and the practices that we talk about here, the combination of these two should actually be a reasonably complete book for an organization that actually wants to go agile the right way from all angles, from implementation as well as from a leadership and culture and those kinds of perspectives.
Nice, JV. Thanks. You actually very nicely brought in a segue into the next question. So for me, when I glanced through the book, and I did a sort of a rapid read twice. So once I did the usual top to bottom, and the second time I did bottoms up, and then sort of navigated the book the way I felt most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I detected familiar patterns in the book, which is basically signatures of each one of y'all. I think simply by virtue of having known y'all and worked with y'all. The question to you, Shiv, is how, although JV alluded to some of it in what he just said, how easy or difficult was it to actually bring it all together?
Yeah, it was a very interesting learning experience. Writing a book had been a dream for me for a long time, but never knew how to get started or whether whatever I write will fit into the format of a book and so on. So in a way, this sequel, instead of introducing new characters, I guess Paramu introduced new authors or co-authors. So like JV said, it did take some time for us to kind of converge on a similar or a more congruent tone, I would say. While each one of us had our thoughts on how we can do that, and our thoughts have also evolved based on the collective experience of PM Power. It is not just what Paramu, JV, or I had to say, because many of the contributions you might be able to relate to as you go through the book, probably something that you had also created at some point of time, right? It is over a period of many years what we collected. But I think for me, the different perspectives that each one of us took kind of became the strength. The loose analogy for me is that just like you have the office productivity suites, Paramu is like the visionary. He has the vision, he's able to describe, he's able to articulate, create scenes and all that. which is more like, let's say, a PowerPoint or a slideshow. Okay, and then JV has this knack of explaining things in a very simple way, and all the practices and making it practical, the connecting bridges, all the word element. And then for me, it was more about, okay, very specific things. Can we just say a few bullets and be done with it rather than writing sentences? So it's more like Excel or a spreadsheet saying, just put everything there, put the facts there together. So when we kind of fell into those kinds of aspects, I think it all kind of fell in place much easier. But still, we did have to go back and forth, try to make sure that we don't actually say contradictory things. It may not be contradictory on the outset, but a divergent view also might appear contradictory. So that way, I think it was a good experience to take different perspectives, meld them together, and then come up with something that is a companion to the earlier book.
In fact,
Right.
Chitra, I wanted to add one perspective there. One area we debated quite heavily, and of course, this was brought up by one of the other, PM Power reviewers. We talk about loyalty in the book, right? We talk about customer loyalty. We also talk about employee loyalty. And while customer loyalty may be a little bit more acceptable, when we talk about today's context, there's a big question about whether we should even talk about employee loyalty, right? In today's, especially the Gen Z crowd and the way the organizations change and evolve and things like that, especially the VUCA world, the tuna world, whatever. Things are changing so much. Is loyalty as important? We debated heavily. I mean, this is not one point that we converged on easily. But finally, we said we will go with what we believed in. And we stuck our neck out and said, employee loyalty adds value to an organization. It's for the audience to comment on this anyway. But it's an interesting, area that we debated quite heavily and had divergent opinions on.
I wouldn't have expected otherwise, Devi. I mean, I think that is one of the things that really defines the essence of PM Power. I think I see unison in terms of how to embody value principles and practices and the relationships between them, and that very strongly has that underlying template through this book. But at the same time, I would expect nothing less than the coming together of so much diversity, which truly enriches the book, in my opinion. Although I did notice one thing which I thought I should call out. Paramu, from your previous two books, I noticed a subtle shift in the manner in which dialogues were happening. And I will definitely look forward to another book because of that, because I'm very curious to see how, and I see some sort of, for the lack of a better phrase, an evolution of thought in terms of your style of writing and how it's coming together. This book, I think, leaves people with a lot to think about. It is not directly prescriptive. That's what I really like. And it certainly provokes a lot of thinking. And it also gives you the tools to do it. So it doesn't kind of leave you hanging, but it gives you the tools to do it. And I really hope it sees a lot of success in corporates. So,
Chitra, you asked about this book continuity and another book, etc. Actually, we were actually talking about this. PM Power has been active in 3 or 4 main areas, right? One was program and project management. Other is agile. A third is leadership. Right now we are into leadership. And another one at a horizontal level in coaching, right? So the next book that we are looking at writing is on leadership. So we're taking the
wonderful
4 dimensions of leadership that PM Power has defined, right? And then bringing in these 5 tantras, right? And then creating a book on this. So myself, Krishna Prasad and Gopalan are looking at writing that book.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
would really look forward to that.
And the
And
last book is one on coaching, right?
oh,
So you get all the experience of coaching from PM Power and put that as a book. So these are so that should kind of complete what PM Power has been doing right now, right?
PM Power and an author's roadmap.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Future plans as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, one point which I wanted to add to JV when you said, actually, when I looked at loyalty, I said, what is this? Did they, do an about turn and start talking about all these e-commerce like companies and talk about customer loyalty and brand loyalty and all of that stuff? And then when I noticed employee loyalty, uh, something actually struck me. In the last 2 years, I've predominantly been working with Gen Z, and it actually means a lot to them to feel needed and belong. It is there.
Okay.
While they do thrive in digital realms, like which is a little hard perhaps for even someone like me to understand. There is a very important need to belong. So I think I'm going to go back and actually look deeper into how y'all have treated the whole employee loyalty and see how that plays out. Because I definitely see that a lot. And there is a need in them to, look out and talk to people about their experiences, especially seasoned folks. I see a lot of my son's, uh, batchmates who are all working, coming back and talking to my husband and me about, what, this happened, what, that happened. I didn't make the mistake, but the production server crashed. What do I do? And it's like reliving our lives all over again. So there's that need to, either have somebody to listen to who you think has been through it, like a coach, like a mentor. So I'm very curious to go back and see what that whole aspect meant.
Chitra, can I add something about one difference that I felt in writing this book? Is that there are these two fellows with me, right? So, and that made a very big difference. Because normally, if I were writing it alone, I'd give it for editing to somebody, reading it to somebody, etc. But they're not fully invested in it. But right now, the topmost auditor of PM Power, Sivaguru, himself is completely invested in this. And the topmost brain of PM Power, JD, also is invested in this. So it made a very big difference. So these two guys, so that's why I said, henceforth when I write, we get more and more people in. So their thoughts actually come.
Certainly, Paramu. I'm also seeing a lot of people pursuing that path, and we'll talk to you more about it after this conversation. I want to shift focus to JV and ask you, JV, are the practices that you've discussed in this book based on any particular model? Where are they coming from?
One thing, when we wrote the book, we were very clear. We wanted it to be model agnostic, right? We didn't want to prescribe a specific model. So the whole idea was we wanted to bring in some good practices for organizations to adopt, tools, techniques, and so on. Obviously, context will matter. So when you get a specific organizational context, the practices might change a little bit. But we picked these practices from two primary sources. One is our own consulting engagements, right? When we consult with organizations, while we actually help them from a philosophy, value perspective, internalization perspective, we also help them with some practices, right? Based on our own experience. Second source of input for this was actually our own customers and some of the other organizations that we surveyed. From their own context perspective, what are some practices that work for them for achieving the outcomes? These are successful organizations, right? In a customer sense or an employee sense and so on and so forth. We actually surveyed them to figure out what practices made them a successful organization from an employee perspective or a customer perspective and so on. And I think a combination of these two, we picked a certain number of practices, 34 in this case. But there are quite a few, that we may not have addressed. There are quite a few that organizations may be doing now, which, they may not find in the book. But these are, in our opinion, a set of good practices for customer focus, employee focus, and what the management should look at, management leadership should look at for ensuring they are successful, profitable, and so on and so forth. So that's the way we looked at it. And I believe that that's probably what our audience wants. They're not looking at a specific recommendation of a model, because I think there are lots of consultants who can actually do that. Because I believe that specific, recommendation should be based on a context. We should go to an organization, figure out what they're doing, and then say what model works for them. So we didn't want to take that approach.
Thanks, JV. In fact, as you were talking, and I think this is also somewhere coming from the space of my experiences over the last 2-3 years, I see, I know that PM Power largely has worked with large enterprises in the software development space. But I also see that there is significant takeaway for smaller companies in different across different business verticals. Today, everybody is touched by tech. So whether you like it or not, you are, like Shiv says, creating it, consuming it, or being influenced and impacted by it in many ways, whether it's through digital transformations, whether although you are fundamentally in a non-tech space, you are relying a lot on technology to help run your business and so on. Is there something that I'll first ask this question to Shiv and then back to JV, you think that smaller companies can take away from this book?
Absolutely. See, the principles of agility are not limited by the size of an organization. Whether it is at a team level, when you want to build, let's say, a scalable solution, everything has to scale. It's not only let's say if it is a software solution, it is not only about the architecture and how it does that, but the moment you have more customers, you will need to support them more. The moment you want to go and acquire customers across regions, there are going to be cultural adaptations and stuff like that, which again would be a kind of a shift in the scale of thinking, even at an individual level. So what we've tried to do here, just to add to what JV said in answer to your earlier question on models, is that you might have heard that all models are wrong, but some models are more useful. So that is what we've tried to convey here, saying that there are these models available, these practices available, and these are the principles that you can use to compose your system. And particularly for small organizations, we see that when they go through their S-curve, after the point of inflection, when they get to, say, the points of stagnation, they have to, let's say, creatively destruct whatever they have built or they need to do and look at some things different. So the principles and the practices by themselves are not limited, so they are scalable, but we need to interpret it in the context.
Absolutely. I agree with that. All of the practices that we have talked about are based on philosophies and principles. So you need to look at that for your own context and see how you apply that. For example, we talk about co-creating solutions with your customers. Right? I don't think it matters only for large organizations, right? Even for small and medium-sized organizations, how do you work with your own customers or prospects and so on and so forth to create solutions that work for them? Many of these practices are actually applicable for organizations that are where size is not a major issue, major constraint.
Yes, I certainly see that. And in fact, I think it brings about a sense of discipline. And I think somewhere in the book, it mentions, I don't remember the exact point, that the more you practice, the more you're able to, or apply the practices, the more you're able to see something that's working or not, and then recalibrate. Either you look at different measures or different areas. But I think the essence is to keep with the practice, as we say, isn't it? So overall, in terms of individual experiences, uh, what did it feel like to each one of you while writing this book? Parpu, do you want to start?
Well, I mean, so this is my fourth, the fifth book that I'm going to publish, right? So for me, it's a normal day, as it were, right? Except that I had to kind of uh, take the inputs from two people who are my co-authors much more seriously than I would have otherwise done. Because in other books, if it's my own writing, I can do whatever I want. I can decide on what should go and what should not go in. But in this, that's not the case. Right? I have to actually make sure that all three of us are in sync before something goes in, because all three are putting our names onto the book, right? So that is one of the main differences. Right? So we have to make sure that everybody, so even practice or tools, etc. If somebody says that's not a good tool, then we have to take it out, right? So that's one difference from writing it alone, right? So that is yeah, that's it.
In fact, were there points in time where you felt like, you know what? I think to hell with all of this. I'm just going to write it all by myself. So how did you, if you felt that way, what did you do
No,
to?
I think all of us would have felt that. It's not just me or Shiv, all of us, because we all have our own points of view, right?
Yeah.
And we want to just get it out there, right? So all of us would have felt that. In fact, there are many places where they say that if you ask individuals, what percent you contributed to the writing of the book, and you add the 3 percentages, it'll be more than 100%, right? So because we all feel that we have contributed a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, but no, it's a common thing that's working, right? It's a combined effort that finally brought the book out. So yeah, so that's a big difference in experience that I felt from writing the other books.
Okay. So Shiv, how about you?
Yeah, in a way, this is my first attempt at a serious book writing. So one big shift for me was in terms of thinking. I used to write a lot of blogs, which are much short form content. Some long form content is also not more than probably 10, 12 pages at a time. And like Paramu said, and what you asked, definitely adjusting to the pace of the others. Now, sometimes you want to go fast, sometimes you are blocked, you just can't move, and they're saying, no, why is this not done yet? No, it does feel at times a little, like a lost cause initially. But then once you get over that initial thing, once there is that convergence, then we could also appreciate, what things could be there. And different perspectives. One example I can cite is, the conversations we had on how do you define or explain efficiency and effectiveness, right? So we had expressed it in our own terms, at least between JV and myself. Then when we put it together and read it, we thought that it may probably confuse people, because these were two different ways of looking at things. So ultimately, what rules is how cogently the messages are conveyed, and then how people are able to take things from it. So we decided to keep one and drop the other. But that is again a collective decision, because it is not that it is wrong or right. These are two different ways of looking at it. And since people are going to put these practices together, they need to have things that are having a kind of a common interface, so to say. Yeah. Otherwise, the pieces will not fit together. So that was one learning for me, that when you create something, it has to be in the context of the larger experience, of the larger value that we are creating as a team. And of course, having these periodic sync ups and then dividing up the work also kind of helped. Though we did take some time on the tool side. How do we make sure, do we write individual documents, merge them together, work on the same document, kind of small things, but they do make a difference in terms of being able to search, put it together, and all that.
JV, what was it like for you? I was given to understand that you were also the product owner of this whole endeavor.
Product owner has its own challenges because, in some sense, I think trying to understand, put the whole thing together, figuring out mapping and linkages, right? That was probably the biggest challenge for me, right? We were talking about different things. We were mentioning names of tools somewhere, practices somewhere. We were even, kind of giving them, labels for it. Are we using the right labels? We changed the labels a few times, making sure that the labels, were consistent across the book. And I'm hoping that with all the numbers that we have talked about, 34 practices and 16 or 17 tools and so many cross-referencing across the book, I'm hoping that we have been able to, ensure that there is consistency across the book. But that was one challenge as a product owner. Second thing was, I think, more to do with, how do we structure this book? Because we were taking it from the previous book, right? In some sense. So do we start with the tantras and then start writing practices around the tantras? That's the first thought process that we had. Then we said that may not be a good idea. And then we debated multiple approaches. Paramu, knowing that he's actually good in writing, was so kind to actually rewrite. He wrote one version of the book for almost 80 to 100 pages or something like that. And then we said that's not a good approach. Then he had to redraw some of the diagrams and things like that. Almost start from scratch. When we decided we'll go from outcomes to practices. So, we did some reasonable amount of work in the beginning. So that's why it took slightly longer than we actually thought. We actually wanted to come out with this book almost 6 months earlier than we actually have come out with. But it's a great learning. I mean, if I really look at it, I think it's difficult to author. Paramu would say that, but it's even more difficult to co-author, right? Because we need to make sure that our writing styles, thought process, kind of merge in some way so that it makes sense for the reader. The reader shouldn't get completely off guard with reading, portions of the book, right? So that was a fair amount of challenge. But in the end, I think the role Paramu played was very crucial. I think starting with that organization, the fictitious organization that we used in the previous book, and ensuring that we had a good, nice story around that. And this time we had a limerick for every division, every section, or every division, or every chapter. Right. Previous time we had a good, nice story from the Panchatantra kind of tales.
Yeah.
This time we chose the limerick approach. We wanted to be different, and Paramu's expertise in limericks actually,
I
came
think
out
it adds the right dose of
right
fun to the book, because my
Absolutely.
second read was just the limerick.
Absolutely. So that, and of course, we
But
had some
I must say I was constrained in writing the limericks for this because of that.
Yeah.
So on the whole, I think on the whole it was a good experience. I mean, I think we're all richer with that experience. So
In fact,
hopefully,
7, 8 months ago, Twitter was trending with everyone writing limericks, and there is a senior government official, Vivek Devroy, who writes limericks and has encouraged many to write. So if you respond on his Twitter handle with limericks, I can assure you'll get a response.
wow. So Paramu, you have probably, you can take Twitter to do.
But dirty limericks are allowed?
All kinds of limericks allowed, from whatever I've read on the now X handle. So,
Okay.
but the other thing I also noticed, JV, and while you were talking and listening to the number of iterations that y'all have put this book through, one thing that stood out from the previous books was the uh, sheer simplicity and clarity in the diagram. When I looked at the various schemas, that was the next thing I did, right? I went and looked at the pictures because I'm quite a visual person. And I said each one of them actually can be like an Instagram post by itself. Right? It carries enough weightage and meaning to stand on their own. So I wanted to call that out as really well done. So
Thank you.
that's nice.
We hope the
So,
readers find it as interesting.
Right.
We look forward to getting a lot of inputs, because
yeah,
we were happy to come out with this, and we do believe that the customers, our partners, whoever uh, looks at who has looked at the previous book certainly would love to get this book and learn a little bit more.
in fact, I noticed that you had several people writing as part of the forward. Looks like you did include many people as part of the pre-release review. And I see that from the sheer numbers, looks like many more people have actually read the book and posted their points of view about it. Uh, what what did you sense from some of those? Did people actually share what they see in terms of the potential of this book? What did they say?
We had good comments from 3 or 4 that at least 3 or 4 stood out. So I think the key theme was a lot of them looked at this is a good set of practices that any organization can actually use, and I think weaving it through the organization experience story, which many people can relate to. Many organizations can actually relate to the fictitious organization that we have brought on. I mean, this is fictitious, but we do know that one or two companies that we have worked with actually have, at least similar kind of, whether it's product line or their experience and so on and so forth. So there is some similarity with with some of the organizations that we have worked with, and that's really what brought this uniqueness with the book, right? How do you actually relate the experience of an organization to what we are talking about? So I think overall we felt good about the feedback that we received from especially 3 or 4 key people who reviewed the book,
That's nice
senior
to
level
hear.
functions. Yeah.
That's nice to hear.
And I
Uh,
think all the reviewers actually read the book. That's important. They actually seem to have read the book and they've gone into details of little things inside. So that's good.
yeah, that's why I sort of asked this question. I wanted to see if there was something else that would emerge. And so, with so many years of coaching and consulting and engaging with different organizations, are there any stories that, or any experiences that stand out to you all as coaches, which found their way in this book? Shiv?
Find them sprinkled across, because this is not limiting to one organization. So all the 5 tantras we've seen both the patterns as well as anti-patterns. When someone says I'm doing lean, many times the focus is only on, let's say, cost cutting or trying to reduce something, and then say investment in tools could get a hit. Saying, oh, why should we pay so much? Okay, let us do with something else, maybe add a few more people, etc., which may be okay in the short run, but in the long run, when they want to scale or when they want to look at complete automation across the life cycle, etc., they again find that a lot of effort that they thought they saved had to be spent. Or the other thing about we do say in leadership by example, or what leaders should do and how they should uh, enable autonomy. It's not that they say, I give you autonomy. Again, we've seen many patterns that have worked well uh, because of either individual styles or as a culture in an organization. We find that some organizations are very welcoming to people in the groups, promoting diversity, etc. So I wouldn't say that it is based on any one organization, but yeah, many such things were what have come into the book.
We have drawn from our oldest organization, Tata Burroughs also, and put that in this book. Things like people going overseas and quitting, and some of those things
Yeah.
actually come from our old organization. So yeah, there are all are organized from digital, or from I'm sure JV and Shiv have gotten from their HCL
And
novel.
yeah, and you still see those people patterns today.
Right.
I don't think it's that significantly different. You do see a lot of it
Right.
today as well. JV, how about you?
I think what I personally liked about, the feedback also, one of the feedback that I forgot to mention about is, I think the approach that we took in writing in the book, right? That's probably unique. It kind of stuck very well. Started with our stakeholders, all the key stakeholders, customers, associates, and shareholders. Looked at outcomes for each one of them, then looked at specific indicators that will actually, uh, actually satisfy those outcomes, or you can measure those outcomes. We looked at practices, then tools and techniques, and all the way linking all of them, right? So, and this linkage has actually brought out with pictures and things like that through our appendices in the book. So, it's a good reference, book for anybody who wants to implement. One is there is a good, nice theme around the book. You can read like a story for an organization. But then it's also a good reference book, in some sense, a handbook of, how do you actually, go through for an organization, starting from your stakeholders, key stakeholders, to, down to the brass tacks in terms of implementation. What are some of the ways that you can actually do that? Some things may be slightly different for a context, but the steps and the way that you go through this whole process actually come out very well. And I think that was somewhat unique. And one of the reviewers actually brought this out, saying that this is very unique and it was a good learning for him. This is a coach, person who's actually an expert coach in the industry, who felt this is a very nice way of illustrating the book. So that was personally satisfying.
Thanks,
One
Devi.
secret formula or ingredient, probably we can't understate that, is the chemistry among the co-authors. The fact that we all pretty much started our careers together more than 4 decades ago. We were together, then we went our own ways, and then we kind of came together. All that was such a safe space. So while there were differences of opinion and everything else, we could share that easily, and we knew that we were all working towards a common cause. So I think the collective, just when I'm saying this, it looks wow that this book is written by people with a collective experience over 100 years, right? Now, seeing the IT industry go through decades of shifts, and trying to put that together, I think that was also a big contributor in terms of making sure that there is a consistent storyline that came through.
I think, Shiv, you brought out such a beautiful point, and I love the reference to a safe space. Because one thing I noticed in the style of this book was, Vishnu Sharman actually coming back and the company welcoming him there and giving him the support to document his journey, and giving him the support to make this whole thing happen. I do hope companies that adopt both the books, I actually see them very much going in tandem. Then see this also as a way to share their experiences, and for that, I think the creation of safe spaces, which I think is truly a hallmark more than ever today in terms of leadership, that can give rise to, I think it can really channelize innovation. I think it can drive company growth. So many things can happen if people get a sense of, hey, I can do this, and I know I'll be supported in doing whatever it is I want to. I can find my community, I can find my tribe, and we can together, create something really magical. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I agree. If you can build a community that can actually do that,
yeah,
nothing like it. That would be in my opinion, the biggest contribution that PM Power would have made from all the efforts that have gone into all the books that have been created and
yeah.
likely to be created in the future as well. So the whole idea is to get the community together, share, and we build a great industry. That's really what the intent of all of us is. So hopefully it does happen.
Nice, Devi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chitra.
Chitra, for helping us pause and reflect. We never reflected this way. We were just running to meet the deadline. Yeah, and now that the book is there, yeah, thanks for your insightful questions and also letting us think how it kind of a quick replay of how the last more than a year has been.
Thank you, Sival. All the best for the
Yeah.
book.